So, welcome to Common Sense. I'm Ed.
And I'm John.
How are you today, John?
I'm good, Ed. How are you?
Good. Great to have everybody here. And as we start, John, just give us a quick description of why common sense. I mean, where did that come from?
Well, common sense refers to the pamphlet, Revolutionary War pamphlet written by Thomas Paine back in the day in the 1770s. And his mission was to inform the rest of the people living in the colonies about the powers that be in England in particular, and just some of the issues that were going on at the time. So it was kind of a no BS approach to understanding what was going on. And that's kind of our mission too, as I see it. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's an interesting parallel. You know, it used to be the powers that be in the revenue growth world, the industrial kind of B2B space where you and I have lived. It used to be the sales trainers, and it used to be the sales managers. And now the powers that be are the buyers. And so it really does take a kind of a very much a common sense approach, which, you know, maybe you and I have a little bit more perspective because we've seen so many different systems over the years that it's maybe easier for us to see because, you know, we're old dogs, but we've learned some new tricks and we've embraced digital. And so we've got the perspective of having seen trends and systems. And so anyway, that's why we think that we've got some common sense for folks that are trying to grow industrial businesses.
Yeah, and we'll be covering a variety of different topics, not just technology, but also strategy, tactics, things that we've learned along the way. So we'll be sharing a lot of that experience that we've gained over total of 60, 65 years of experience.
And I really look forward to that distinction between strategy and tactics. It drives me nuts when those two get conflated, and it really costs companies opportunities. That's a great one. Today, we're going to start with one that actually blends strategy and tactics, and that's how and when and why to buy a CRM and to use it. So whether you should have it, how to buy it, that's really kind of strategy, what you want to get out of it, but how to use it and how to implement it becomes very tactical. So, John, you're the MarTech whisperer. Take us away. Why should we buy CRM?
Well, there's a lot of reasons to buy a CRM, to invest in it. It's more of an investment than just a purchase, as we'll talk about. But there are really four main reasons. One is growing revenues, winning more complex sales, a higher percentage of sales. Also, the second one would be improving efficiency, so improving the sales team and the way they operate, increasing account retention, and expanding sales accounts, upselling accounts into different departments, and so on. And the last one's a little bit unusual, but it's improving these sales teams' morale overall because they're winning more sales. They're doing better. So those are kind of the four pillars of why you should do CRM.
We'll have to come back to that one because everyone talks about CRM as being a morale killer in the sales force. Big Brother's tracking us.
Learning how to use it can hurt morale a little bit, but once you get there and you start pulling in the paychecks, it's a different story.
So those examples that you gave certainly illustrate why it's CRM, customer relationships management, as opposed to a contact manager that many people traditionally think of it as.
That's right. CRM is more than that. It's the customer relationship management software title itself is a bit of a misnomer because it really starts mostly with leads and prospects. Most people use the tools for that. And it's not just about a list of possible prospects. It's really about who they are and what they do and how they fit into your products and services and vice versa. So it's really more of an information system.
And then, of course, from the kind of the data side of it, then you get into the forecasting side of it with projects or opportunities or deals, whatever. They're called different things in different systems, but that adds kind of a third dimension to it.
It does, and it's something that's been missing all along through sales is just the accountability side of it. How do you keep track of everything that's gone on a daily basis, on an account basis, on a person-by-person basis? How do you report that up the chain to management and ERPs and things like that? So that's a real value that CRM adds that is really super necessary nowadays.
So when you talk about vision into the revenue growth effort from around the organization, that brings up a question. Traditionally, CRM, at least in my experience, has been thought of as software for the sales team. But a lot of what you're describing actually happens outside of sort of that classic field sales purview or area of responsibility. So are you suggesting that CRM is actually bigger than a sales software?
It is, and it's a matter of not just the technical side of it, it's really the process that you go through. So if you think of the whole sales process as being a continuum, from the first time somebody finds out about your brand or your products through a Google search or a friend tells them or they go to a trade show, whatever that first touch is, then all the way through to when they first purchase, and then multiple purchases and support issues and things like that after the sale. That's all one process. It's all dealing with one person, the customer. And it's really important to have a continuous buyer experience, a high quality buyer experience throughout that process nowadays. That's how people win and keep customers. So it's also true on the software side as well as the process side. So what we're talking about is really kind of putting all of that together.
I saw a fascinating article this morning talking about Chobani, how Chobani has reorganized our revenue growth function from the traditional silos of PR and marketing and sales and customer service. And now they've essentially said, okay, all of these people have the same objective. There's going to be different skills and different buyer expectations at different points along that journey, but we're talking about doing the same thing, basically. I find an interesting example. I talk to people about chat. If you go to a website and you submit a chat request, you say, I only want somebody from sales to answer this chat, or I only want somebody from technical support to answer this chat. No, you expect the right answer kind of contingent on the context of the question that you're asking. You just have this relationship as a buyer, and sellers somehow just still are stuck in this model of, well, this is what sales does and this is what marketing does. So it's interesting to hear you talk about CRM as a tool that actually helps to overcome that and elongate that relationship from the selling perspective.
Yeah, and think about how frustrating it's always been when you try to get support from anyone. You, more often than not, you're sent to a web page, a phone number to call, and you can't get through to someone who speaks English. There's an email address or a form, you fill it out, and we'll get back to you when we can. And maybe you hear about it 3 or 4 days later, and it's just the same thing on an email. So right. That's what we would think of as a bad customer experience. And now it's really possible through technology and really working well with technology to turn that around and make it a very positive experience that not only wins sales, but keeps you as a loyal customer.
So you talked about how a CRM can offer the window into the customer interests and behaviors and what they've done on your site, how they've interacted with your content. I've heard that referred to as digital body language, and it's kind of the modern day equivalent of those hints or insights that you might pick up from somebody's facial expression or body language you sit across the table from in the meetings that we don't have anymore. Can you give some examples of how marketing and or sales would interpret or infer from the digital body language and how they might use that to more effectively engage with a prospect?
Sure. So if you think about that customer experience from day one, you can track and find out what exactly they were looking for. So you can know from Google, for example, what the search was about when they go and click on a page on your website, or maybe it's a social media site, or maybe it's something else. All of that data is trackable. And so what they're doing. Exactly, what they're looking for, how they're looking for it, and when. And so all of that information can be combined into a marketing life cycle or a timeline, and you can actually see what your potential buyers as well as your actual customers are doing. So what their interests are, when they're likely to buy, kind of where they'd like to go. So you can put advertising in front of them in the right place at the right time exactly You can even figure out when they open emails, so you can send them emails at exactly the right time of day with something that is in context with what they were looking for. It's relevant to what they're looking for, and it's timely, and that's shown to be by far higher conversion rates for lead conversions as well as sales than anything else. So it's very, very powerful, these tools.
And I love that you mentioned customers in there. We call it customer relationship management, but almost always it focuses on prospects and leads. And as soon as a deal gets done, oh, well, that goes into the ERP database or something like that. And the idea of actually understanding what customers are doing and continuing to market to them and continuing to provide value, not just to extend the sale and upsell, cross-sell, all that kind of stuff, but actually to be a better resource for customers over time. I mean, that's an important piece of it too.
It's crucial. I mean, think of the term complex sale. It takes a while to convince someone in a complex sale. It could take a year or more for capital equipment to get someone to the table and sign on the dotted line. But then what? I mean, are you gonna help them learn how to use this big tractor? Or are you gonna support them with additional information and how-tos and follow up with them and see if everything's going okay and if they need some additional replacement parts? I mean, the whole continuum is so important.
Even if it's not selling them something, even if it's best practices that you have developed over the last couple of years since they bought it, through observing other customers, share that information. Obviously nothing proprietary, but help them be better at their jobs.
Yeah, and referral sales are usually right up at the top 3 for most companies. So even if you don't buy, you can recommend the company because the experience was so good for you.
Right. And of course, buyers move.
Someone's
buyers
asking
move a lot too, from company to company.
Right. Yeah. So.
All right. So we're kind of talking about at a high level why CRM is beneficial to business, why people should be interested in it. But at its core, there's potentially a tremendously valuable asset in the data. And I mean, you're a data guy from the beginning of your career when you were a geophysicist and using data to try to understand geological formations and everything else. So let's get geeky for a second and let's talk data and why data is so important, how CRM enables that.
Well, data is so important because it's your lifeblood. You're not generating new leads if you're not collecting them. So the marketing department's job is really to collect new leads and to help nurture them into becoming prospects and sales. So the data is super important there. You got to know what makes these people tick, and are they qualified to be your customer? What kinds of companies do they work for, and what are their roles, and what kinds of things are they interested in? So collecting all of that data in one repository and then analyzing it is the key to successful sales.
So when somebody says, well, geez, I do that in a spreadsheet, there's only so much you can do with a pivot table. I mean, a lot of the analysis that you're talking about, you got to work from really a proper database to be able to extract the insights, if I understand correctly what you're saying.
Well, think about it too. You probably have thousands, if not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of potential leads in your database, and they're all doing different things all day long. How could you possibly keep track of that unless you had a system that does that automatically for you? So that's really super powerful right there. And then, as we discussed earlier, just the whole lifetime, the whole life cycle of a customer in your sales funnel is ultra important. So you have to track all the events along the way there too. And then probably most important to the corporation is the aggregate part of that. How well are sales going? What types of products are selling? What are the best methods to sell? What are the most efficient tactics that people are taking? What are the best advertising channels? You have data following all of that, and you have to analyze it, boil it down, understand it, and report it, or it's meaningless, and you can't really do any forecasting or budgeting unless you have that data at your fingertips.
Or process improvement. And one of the interesting things that I find is a lot of the kinds of companies you and I are accustomed to dealing with, have been incredibly thoughtful and rigorous in developing their manufacturing and their operational processes. I mean, there's Lean, there's Six Sigma, there's very strong attention to detail in each step along the way in their optimized processes. On the front end of the business, though, this revenue growth side, there's not nearly as much of that. And so as you're talking about being able to analyze the data, I'm thinking, well, what if you understood which lead source actually sold fastest? What your sales cycle was according to lead source, what your customer acquisition cost was according to the source that you generated the lead from. And what if you could take that a step further and actually know when you generated a lead, which one is likely to close and when it's likely to happen? Imagine the power you'd have where your forecasting was actually data-based rather than just kind of, stick a finger in the wind and see what it feels like. I mean, that impacts valuation, not to mention your material planning and production planning and staffing and everything else. That data could be a corporate asset and substantially change the way you run the operation. It sounds like.
Yeah, that's right. And also you can look inward. You can look at the performance of your sales team as individuals and see how they're doing, what kinds of activities they're doing, which ones are the most successful. Maybe your sales team isn't organized the right way. Maybe you need more sales development reps to reach out and start these conversations and have maybe fewer senior sales reps. I mean, there are all kinds of decisions that can be made based on analysis of the data.
I love looking at a graphic showing a sales rep's performance and showing deals in different stages. You see those that are kind of early stage, they're developing new stuff. You see those that have been quoted. You see those that are actually sold. And you can have a number of different stages within there, but that's a fascinating comparison. And in my experience, there ought to be a balance between those, but often what you see is a huge amount sold and very little of the development stuff. I mean, not a bad thing. It's great to have people selling a lot, but are they going to sell a lot next year if they're not developing? Or you see this huge bubble in the middle, like a snake that just ate some sort of a big animal, where it's all quotes and there's not a lot of development and there's not a lot being sold. And so it's, that's kind of classic sales management information, understand who to coach and what part of the process to coach on.
Yeah, and if you're doing it right, you go back to the sales team, you get them involved in analyzing their own data and understanding why trying to understand why that's happening. Why aren't these deals going further? What is it that we're doing wrong, in terms of satisfying our buyers and getting the information they need to make the right decision? And what kinds of outreach should we be doing in order to make that process move along a little bit quicker? What kinds of leads are falling by the wayside? Can we categorize them and maybe avoid them? Maybe we should put our eggs in another basket, as you said earlier. So there's a lot you can do just with the data itself.
And so along those lines of process and how firms have very highly refined processes on the back end and not so much on the front end, let's talk for a second about how CRM can help to, let me say it differently. You've described how you can use the data to evaluate process, identify shortcomings. But once you've done that, how can you use CRM to begin to implement process or to create a structure or framework so that deals start to flow more consistently and everyone understands the behaviors and the process that you've identified as a company helps get deals done?
That's a great question because it's really a chicken egg thing, right? I mean, CRM itself is a process just to use the software. You've got to understand how it works and what it means to get a lead into the system and what do you need to do next in order to nurture them along through the system.
Right.
So it's inherently process driven, and it doesn't work well at all if you just throw it at a team and just say, hey, use these tools and you'll be better, because it's not about that. It's not about just filling in contact records. It's about how you assign prospects. It's about how you send content to them at different times. What are the thresholds for different stages of the buyer journey? All of these things are process questions that your sales team really needs to be involved in. So they need to learn as they go and modify their own process to make it more efficient. And it even goes further than that. You really need to get the sales team and the marketing team together, because that handoff between marketing and sales has to be seamless. And they really need to be on the same page about what qualifies a lead and what doesn't. You know?
So I'd go a step further and not get the departments together. I'd obliterate the boundary and make them
Right.
pieces of a continuum. But so given what you're describing, you know, in my experience, CRM has been bought either by the VP of sales, director of sales, whatever that title was, or by the IT department. But based on what you're describing, we're talking about kind of, maybe fundamentally is too strong a word, but substantially changing that relationship and interaction across our customer facing departments with prospects and customers. So it feels like, you know, this is something the CEO is going to want to delegate because he doesn't think CRM is something that merits his attention, but it feels like it's a CEO question in many ways.
It is, because if you go fundamental on me, really, the whole corporation ought to be customer centric. They ought to be really focusing on the customer experience at all levels, because executives talk to other executives, right? And service department and the production department and shipping and all of that is part of the customer experience. And they all need to share those core values, those processes. They need to not be stepping on each other's toes.
Right.
They need to know when the right handoff is and what that's supposed to look like. They need to be talking together about the problems they're facing and how to solve them. So it's sort of a Kaizen thing, but it's back to customer experience, not building products. So
again, this chicken and the egg scenario where CRM can help to create those bonds and cross boundaries between departments, but in order to set it up in a way where it's going to achieve that, you have to philosophically at the management level accept that one of the goals is to use CRM as a tool to accomplish this. So there's got to be that management buy-in and vision first, and then the software comes second, it sounds like.
I think so, and I think it's the place where it probably would happen on its own, because everyone's talking about disruption nowadays at all levels in all industries. And what they're talking about is really this same issue, is that we're not designing our products and services for the customers, for what they want. And the buyer experience is about us selling to them still.
Right.
No one wants that. We've all been programmed by Uber and Amazon and everything else to expect a seamless, quick, painless customer experience where we just figure out what we want, we
Right.
push a button and we get it. And so that's true at all levels in all industries now. And if CEOs aren't dealing with that problem, they probably are in some trouble.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, so much of the sales lexicon remains what we're going to do to a buyer, how we're going to say this, what we're going to give them next, rather than understanding what they're looking for, or even intuiting what would be helpful that they might not even realize they need, and making that easily accessible to them.
That's really the best way to sell, is right. To have that conversation first.
Right. So what kinds of companies or what situations is CRM a bad idea for?
That's a great question. Companies that move way too fast to even have a sales team, like restaurants and what else? I'm sure you can think of some others, but retail is tough too, because you don't have accounts really. You just have thousands of people jumping online. So e-commerce is the solution for those.
So in that situation, you'd use a different kind of software, but you'd still be collecting those insights and understanding the behaviors, and you'd be building some automation to respond to them. But it's not going to be a salesperson doing it through a phone call. It's going to be the automatic product suggestion engine doing it in the background or something.
Right, exactly. It's really an equivalent process, like you said, but there's fewer humans involved.
Right.
There might be a lot of people out on the retail show floor or whatever, but they're not necessarily selling, although that's not really true. They are selling, and
Yeah, of course.
waiters and waitresses are selling too. It's just that they're not keeping track of it.
So if you do a CRM search, what's the best CRM? I'm sure that you're going to come up with, there must be 200 or 300 viable SaaS CRM products that are available. How does a company decide which one it ought to buy? I mean, how do you spec out what you need or understand the functionality or select from a variety that all look honestly pretty much the same?
Yeah, that's really a big challenge now. And people like Scott Brinker at the Chief Martech have been keeping track of this, and he has these gigantic displays of all these thousands of logos for all the MarTech companies that fit into different categories. And CRM alone has about 120 of them now, and it's
Wow.
escalating very quickly. So the issue really is not so much how do you go through and find the best price or maybe the best fit. It's really about what your needs are. So different types of industries, different types of companies, different size sales teams. You really have to put all that information together and also take account of what you already have as legacy systems or even brand new systems, and how things need to merge together in order to share all this data like we've been discussing.
Right.
So it's not a simple answer. G2 Crowd is a good place to go to sort of take a look at the landscape. But I think, it's really kind of a matter of sitting down and kind of going through maybe the top 5 that sort of fit your needs. And taking account of things that maybe you haven't thought about, like how are people going to use this software? How well are they going to onboard themselves to it and learn how to take advantage of it? How well does it exchange information with other types of systems that you need? Does it even work well with, for example, channel partners? Can you incorporate some new ideas into
Right.
your sales process? So there's a lot of complexity to it, which is probably one of the main reasons people sort of wait to make a decision.
They make the decision by default, but just not doing anything. And the contact management for the company ends up in a variety of different OST files with each person's individual Outlook account. And there's no opportunity for that data and analysis that you talk about. My experience is that there's kind of a decision that underlies all the rest of it. Are you buying CRM for management, or are you buying CRM for the sales team? And if you want it for management, then something that's really complex with roll-up reports and lots of dashboards and stuff like that may seem really cool. And the salespeople may just rebel and refuse, oh, it takes too much time, I'm not going to do it. On the other hand, if you buy it for the salespeople, make it really easy to use for them, help it automate the kinds of stuff they hate doing, the routine tasks, keep them on top of it, let them focus on where they're creating value. You may not get all the management bells and whistles, but you may end up with a better outcome. Does that match things that you've seen, or is that an antiquated idea?
No, I think those are two big components to the decision, and they do sometimes compete with each other. I mean, if you have to make a generalization, I'd say the smaller the business, the more the usability issue becomes, more of a problem. And as you go upriver to the big companies with lots of divisions and so on, then the reporting part really takes over. It becomes critical.
Right.
So yeah, it depends on what kind of company you are, what size company you are to some extent. But they are building, people are listening, and they are building systems that do both. So you really want to try to look for those. Those are going to be more expensive, of course. So it really does depend on your budget as well.
And how about in terms of administering it? Is a CRM something that you have to have an IT consultant to help you tweak and set up, or should a company be able to? I mean, I hear stories about there are entire businesses built on helping companies use Salesforce, and that feels like a lot of overhead. Is that appropriate, or should a CRM be something that's simple to do with one of your marketing team just making adjustments?
Well, that sounds more like a small business scenario again. The other one where you have multiple, thousands of instances of Salesforce, for example, on a gigantic contact database, then you probably do need some oversight and some management because that can be quite complex.
Right.
And I wouldn't recommend necessarily just saying, "Hey, here, IT group, here's Salesforce, deal with it." I would actually hire some people who have their feet in both camps and really understand how that works.
And maybe I've seen use cases where it's failed or where it's been adopted and enthusiastically embraced and understanding. I mean, it's probably things even as simple as what fields you got on the screen and what order they're filled out in can make a big difference for the sales rep trying to enter information between meetings.
That's right. And it's now to the point where you can carry it on your iPhone or your mobile phone and be updating in the field on the fly, anytime. So there's really no excuse for keeping track of your activities and it helps you too. I mean, what turns on a sales rep is looking up at that leaderboard and seeing their name at the top of the list and seeing that big check come in. So when that stuff starts happening because you're able to stay on top of your accounts better and really serve them better and win more deals and more upsells and retentions, they like it too,
And if you can incorporate your channel into that, the way you alluded to earlier, I mean, that's a huge win. I mean, the friction between manufacturers and channel, it's long-standing and it's really frustrating. And there's this whole debate going on about what's the role of channel in a world of the internet. And I mean, if some of the things that I've seen done where people use marketing automation to actually trigger alerts to channel partners that a shared prospect has been back on the site and what kind of information they're looking at or what the interaction has been. I mean, that real-time information, even by text message to the channel salesperson, that's hugely powerful. And not only does it help sell, but it helps build a much stronger relationship with the channel too. So that's a great point that you make.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest complaints that channel partners have is that they don't get the support they need during the sale. So they don't get the right content, the right brochures, they don't get the right product pamphlets, and so on. And if that can be automated to some extent, if not completely, their lives are a lot easier too, and they might be more predisposed to sell your products just because it's an easier process and maybe they understand it better as well.
Right.
Maybe they have more conversations with the technical people and so on. They become more of a real extension of your company rather than just a one-off.
Right. So as we kind of get close to the end here, let's identify a couple of the problems that a CEO might think about when they're stuck in traffic on the way home at the end of a crummy week and saying, geez, I gotta fix this. And they may not be thinking contact management or customer relationship management, but what are the business problems that they would be struggling with trying to fix that you think CRM might be an important component of the solution for?
Well, I think it starts with an assessment of some kind that revenues are maybe not dropping off completely. They're not losing money, but it's not growing the way it used to. So some kind of analysis of that, why is that happening? Why is the sales team losing more deals than they used to? Why are there still more dropping off, as you mentioned earlier? And it might start with the CSO, instead of the CEO, but these problems start to boil up and then they start to see people leaving. We talked a little bit about that, but think about it for a sec. If a sales rep isn't winning deals and they're not making money, they're not happy, and they might start to blame the company and the product, and they might look elsewhere.
Salespeople are going to blame everybody except themselves. That's for sure.
Right. Or the sales and marketing teams are pointing fingers at each other, and it's a big blame game, and so morale is going down.
Right.
That's the CEO's job too. So these are the kind of general problems that would boil up and make you lose some sleep.
But high level revenue generation kinds of things, you believe that as you start to peel back the layers of the onion, you'll often find that the insights, the functionality, the efficiency that you gain through a good CRM implementation actually speak to those bigger business problems.
They do. I mean, you can see that in companies that are succeeding.
Right.
And you go in and ask them what they're doing and what they've done to address these issues. And it won't just be that we've bought some software. It'll be that really we kind of started a culture change. And we started really thinking about what our buyers want. And then we figured out how to get that. And technology is certainly part of that. Training, process, buy-in, all of those things. And it's really a culture change, which is not easy. I mean, no CEO wants to just suddenly drop everything and do a culture change.
Right. But philosophically, that mindset shift from we do something to buyers, we sell to them, we say this, we push this at them, we tell them this, to we're going to imagine being those buyers because we're buyers ourselves in other situations. And how do we want to be treated and how can we make it easy for them? Feels like that kind of underlies this entire conversation.
It does. And just getting real about it. A lot of companies maybe don't even realize they have this problem.
Right.
And so maybe it does make sense to bring a consultant in at a high level and say, look, guys, I'm looking at this objectively and here's what you're doing. You're ignoring your customers and you're just going on the same old stuff.
Right.
And then if you get in the door there and get some commitment going, then it's maybe time for more technical people to come in and help you build out that infrastructure.
And that's exactly what you do, right? I was the MarTech Whisperers, understand this multitude of platforms. You talked about that Scott Brinker chart with thousands of companies, but what does it all do? And do you need it all? And which do you need for your business and for your industry? And how do they fit together? And what plays nice with each other and with legacy systems that you already have, as you mentioned? And I mean, what's an appropriate implementation framework? And that's what you do for companies, right?
That's right. Yeah. It's fun, but it's also challenging, as is your job in trying to convince them to make a change.
Right. Cool. Well, we've covered a lot of ground on CRM. Is there anything that we've missed that you think we should be talking about before we wrap up?
I just want to hammer home that last point we just made. Don't just make a knee-jerk reaction and go out and buy software. I mean, a lot of companies think that that's going to patch the hole, and it usually backfires, and it can take years to get out of that sort of frustration mode. So think strategically first before you go out and buy something.
Cool. Well, that's it for today. So the Common Sense videos are shared in a variety of places online, including YouTube and Facebook and our websites and blogs. And we'd be delighted for people to subscribe to them as we talk about a variety of other issues going forward. Any comments as we wrap up, John?
I just want to thank everyone for watching, and feel free to leave us any comments on any of those channels, and we'll be happy to answer them.
Thanks. So I'm wrapping up. I'm Ed.
And I'm John. We're the Common Sense Patriots.